Our plenary speaker for this afternoon is Joe Murley, and I could have done the normal, reading his bio and boring all of you and Joe. Needless to say, Joe is an incredibly accomplished lean thinker, lean leader. He has led multiple private sector lean transformations. Successful is the key part of that. Joe has developed a lean management system. He's written a book that some of you may have read or have, but I want to share with you, and I know Joe may be talking about this a little bit, about how I met Joe, and how Joe has come to be here today. As some of you may have heard me tell my lean story or my lean journey, I was the director of the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. I had made some pretty significant promises to the regulated community about getting them their permits faster in exchange for them agreeing to support legislation that would cause them to pay for them for the first time. And I had I had no idea how I was going to do that, by the way, when I made that promise. I wasn't very smart, but I knew we'd kind of figured out a way. And with that, when struggling through mightily with how to do that, I ended up hiring someone who is currently the director at Arizona DEQ. His name is Misael Cabrera, and Misael already knew a lot about lean, and he was a constant learner, and was constantly looking for opportunities to learn more. And he asked one afternoon whether or not I'd support him going and seeing Joe, or not seeing you speak, but he was part of a seminar, as I recall. A seminar that Joe puts on, and when Misael came back, I mean, for those of you who know Misael, he's pretty high energy to begin with, but he was even more high energy after coming back from meeting Joe, and he wanted us to all get to know him, get to meet him, and for him to come out and help us in our lean journey. And we had decided that we were going to deploy a lean management system rather than just doing a series of lean projects. And we were really struggling with how we were going to do that. Misael, through his connection with Joe and seeing going to seminar, felt like, and actually did, find a lean management system that we could deploy in my agency. That's not the best part of the story, by the way. And Joe, I apologize if I'm stealing some of your thunder. But Joe said no. Didn't you, Joe? I did. We invited him. We said we'd even pay him to come and speak to our leadership team and to help us deploy a lean management system, and he literally said no. And what he said was that lean won't work in government. He said, lean's not going to work in government. I don't think that you guys are as serious as you think you are, or you're not as serious as you think you are, and he wouldn't do it. So we didn't bribe him. We didn't say we'd pay him more money. But I don't know what the triggering event was, and maybe he'll share that with us about why he ultimately decided to come help us. But he did. And I think through his experience in dealing with my former agency and then helping us deploy lean management throughout Arizona, but I think Joe's perspective about lean in government has changed. Joe is now making efforts to help other federal agencies, and maybe he'll mention some of the other federal agencies that he's working with already. But Joe now, I think, is a true believer in how lean can be used and lean management can be used not only in government, but also in the federal space. Joe is probably my number one mentor in lean management. I've learned more from Joe than just about anybody else in lean management. So I'm incredibly honored that he's here. I'm incredibly honored to introduce him. So please join me in welcoming Joe Murley.
Appreciate that. So I'm afraid I might be, as an engineer, there's this concept of stressing something to failure. I think Henry might just have done that to me. So I said no. Why did I say no? Because it was a waste of my time, and I'm getting too old to waste it now. So Plus, I said, there's no way in hell am I going to go through all this government bureaucracy to just come in there and teach this 2-day class that I just got through teaching you. You should have paid attention. You should teach it yourself. So Misael, though, is a persistent individual. And he says, well, look, I won't make you go through any of the bureaucracy. I never asked him how he managed to do that, but he did. And he never got put in jail for it, so I assume it's okay. But if you come and teach that class, I'd be most appreciative. And if at the end of it, you don't want to do anything more with us, you don't have to do anything more with us. But I really would appreciate it if you just taught the class on the lean management system, because I've been searching up and down for somebody that thinks of lean as a management system, and you're the first person I'm running into that thinks of it that way and speaks of it that way. And it's really important for us to hear that message. So I came in. And I'm going to preface what I'm about to say that lean does not mean shrink, right? You don't become a successful lean organization by firing a bunch of people, contrary to popular belief. But, and I don't know if Henry knows this, the one thing that I left with, how many people here have seen the original Willy Wonka movie? Okay, everybody, good. I don't like the Johnny Depp version, by the way. It's too dark for me. But at the end, when he brings back the ever-loving gobstopper, and Gene Wilder gives him the keys to the kingdom, the ever-loving gobstopper, to me, the thing that I've always believed about government that he proved me wrong on was, if you get a bad actor in your organization in a government setting, there's not much you're going to do about it. They're just going to go sit in the corner and, but Misael proved to me, and I hadn't quite met Henry yet, but the combination of them proved to me that, if you're persistent and you're focused and somebody truly is a bad actor and there's a trail there that you can prove, you can get rid of that person. Not that you want to get rid of people, so please don't misquote me here. I don't ever want you to have to fire anyone because I want you to hire them properly and I want you to manage them properly so you don't ever want to lose them. But if you find yourself in a situation where you have these people that just aren't getting on board, no matter what you do, he proved to me that in a government setting, you can deal with that effectively. It ain't easy, it takes time, but you did it. And I said, you know what? If you want me back, I'll come back. That was 6 years ago. So since then, we became very involved in Arizona, and I'm going to talk to you some more about my government experience. And I have some observations about this whole affair of implementing a lean management system in public service. And it's pretty much consumed, well, at least the majority of my emotional energy for the last 4 years, 5 years. And we'll talk some more about that. So anyway, we're going to talk about Andon. But I'm going to talk to you about it in the context of a lean management system because that's the way we do everything. We always talk about it as an element of a system. And we only have 45 minutes, at this point 43. So it's not going to be awfully deep, but I want you to walk away with a few important concepts. And if you have more questions, I am going to be at the mixer. I saw they have scotch at the bar, so I'll be here. And we can talk at length. So, let's see, do we have slides going up there? There we go. All right, Murley Group, lots of people, 38 people in the organization. But what I really want you to take away is that we are a people-centered lean organization. Lean is not about a technical improvement to a process. It's about enabling people to be their best. And if you're not thinking of it that way, you're going to miss the boat and you won't be able to sustain it for very long. Okay, we have a tack time of 45 minutes. And after that, a little bit of closing remarks from I think Henry's coming back up. And then we have Miller time. Anybody here remember Miller time? Okay, for those of you that aren't big into beer, there is an Andon beer. I found that out just recently. And for those of you who don't like beer at all, wine will suffice as well. There is an Andon wine as well, I guess. Okay, lean in government. It ain't easy. It's hard as hell. And I think it was Aristotle that talked about it being the most noble profession. As far as being a lean consultant is concerned, somebody that teaches lean and researches lean and tries to put it into practice, I believe it to be a noble profession because it truly is public service. And let me see a show of hands here. How many people here feel that adopting a lean management system in a government setting is more difficult than an automotive setting? Okay. You're right. But you're probably not focused on where it's most difficult. That's what I want to get to here. Couple of things. In some ways, it's much easier. One of the biggest advantages you have over any other private organization I ever worked for is you're highly mission-driven. Government agencies, the people that work in government agencies, let's face it, you're not there because you want to make $1 million, right? You're not going to get rich and famous over it. You're genuinely mission-driven. In this case, you're driven by doing good for the environment. That's good. Most private companies would kill for that kind of dedication. You have it. It's inherent in your business. That's a positive. Well, negative. Adopting a lean management system represents significant change. Government agencies are difficult to change. And we put this word over it, bureaucracy makes it sound like a negative thing, right? But I had to make my peace with that. And the way I've made my peace with it is, it's actually necessary, right? The level of oversight and control, the things that slow you down from changing as fast as a wire mold would when they took over a new division or something like that, are the things that keep anarchy from seeping into our system. Right? So that oversight, that it takes multiple people to nod their head yes, and any one person can nod their head no, is frankly what contributes to stability in this country. So we have to respect that. We have to work with it. But that doesn't mean you give up, right? You just keep working at it. So that's something you have to be conscious of. The other thing is just technical approach in how we work with organizations to become lean thinking organizations. If I were to take a nominal engagement where we're developing leader-standard work and lean leadership behaviors and problem-solving competencies in an organization, and let's say we take a standard 100 hours, we'd probably spend 40 of those hours at the frontline leadership level, supervisors eyeball to eyeball with the machinist on the floor, another 40 hours with the top executive team, and the rest would be scattered about in what we unaffectionately call the frozen middle. And it's sad. It's sad because they truly are underserved in that model. But we felt if you only have 100 hours, it actually is the best way to go because these senior leaders coming down and doing those reflection meetings and doing those Gemba walks are going to drag the middle leadership in with them, and they'll get it by that association. Versus if we leave the senior leaders out, these folks won't change. In government, that model doesn't work. Why? Because these senior leaders that we just invested 40% of our time on, they're going to be gone in 4 years. Right? It's the nature of the business. So not a bad thing, it just is the nature of the business. So consequently, instead of this upside down bell curve on where we spend our time in developing leadership competencies, we'd spend the same amount of time at the front lines, much more time at the middle, and I'm sorry, Henry, but a little bit less time out here at the other ends when you fly off in your private jets to Vegas and party down that the job's over, right?
Yes, that's my
Yeah, that's it. Yes. Yes. I want to carry the bags. That's all I want, okay? So there's some differences there in how you approach things. The point is, the principles remain the same. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The approach to working with the organization changes because of the realities of your organization. But you know what? That has been true everywhere we've gone since Toyota. And I don't think enough people really appreciate that the truly successful lean organizations out there have had to adopt the principles of a lean thinking organization, but the tools had to manifest themselves in a way that made sense in their environment. Right? And that's what you're doing now. And by the way, I'm really impressed. I did not expect to see this level of engagement here. The fact that there's so many of you here, and most of you here voluntarily, in itself speaks volumes. And I've listened to the conversations, and you are much further ahead than I thought you would be at this point in your transformation. But you're not nearly as far ahead as you think you are. You figure that out. All right, so here's the beginning. Arizona, 2014, 2013, Miss Sayel was in the class. By the time we got through all the bureaucracy, we got in there and we started working, and we're doing a value stream mapping event, and we're value stream mapping the life cycle of an underground storage tank from the time somebody said, hey, I want to go bury a tank in the ground, until the end of its life cycle when we suspected it might be leaking, then confirmed it's leaking, pulled it out of the ground and remediated the earth around it. That's the life cycle. We value stream mapped all that. And people's heads were exploding, like in Mars attacks when the heads explode and it splatters all over the inside of the helmet as they're yodeling. They were up there working on it, and as the group was working on it, I'm kind of letting them go a bit, and I'm in the back, and I'm thinking about this, and I'm saying, man, I don't know, there's something like between 3,000 and 4,000 underground storage tanks in Arizona, more or less, right? Something like that. I said, what would you think if we built a visual management tool that told you the status of each and every one of those 3,000 to 4,000 tanks in an instant visually? That's ridiculous. Forget I said it, because I want you to concentrate on your value stream mapping here. And if we start talking about this, we won't get anything else done. But in the back of the room, I started to sketch one up and started to think about, what would this thing look like? And little by little, they adopted it. First of all, they said it was ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And then they picked it up and they said, well, this isn't going to be right, but we could do this and we could do this. And they had a meltdown, by the way. I don't know if Henry will share this with you. They totally had a meltdown and ripped it all off the wall and stopped working on it for a period of time. And it got down to where, I had to go Japanese on them and say, you people are cement heads, you're just not getting it. And mostly because I lost my temper. I'd like to say it was constructive, but it really wasn't. I just wanted to vent at that point, right? So finally the smoke settled, and I came back some months later, and lo and behold, another ever-loving gobstopper. It went back up. And ever since then, they've continued to take this concept of making this information visual, because it's not a physical widget anymore, it's just information, and using that as a way to tell at a glance what's normal versus abnormal, and then put some standard of work around the abnormalities. And they've probably taken it further than any other government agency that I'm aware of right now. So that's where it started, right there. So pretty cool. So the andon. That's right, we're supposed to talk about andons. So this is everything you ever wanted to know about an andon. Not. Well, it is, but my suspicion is you're probably looking at this and saying, oh yeah, there's somebody putting the front seat into a Toyota Camry, and if it doesn't line up, they pull the andon cord and somebody comes and helps them, right? That makes sense? That kind of what you would feel about it? That's dead wrong. It is absolutely dead wrong. All right? It's not a call for help. It is, but it isn't, not in the way you're thinking about it. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. First of all, notice the seconds on the bottom. All right, that car's in that workstation for 60 seconds. The work had to be designed to make an abnormality very painful and very visible to everybody. If that car can't get out of that 60-second block exactly right, and it gets near the finish line, I'm required to pull the andon. It's not just something I can do to ask for help. It is my job to pull the andon. I may even know how to fix it. I may even say, you know what? I'll just get a Phillips head screwdriver and push it in between the two holes and line them up and shove the bolt in there, and I can get that seat in. I'm still required to pull the andon. Why? Well, we'll talk about that. So the work had to be redesigned. There had to be a communication device that calls somebody. And then guess what? Somebody actually has to show up within less than 60 seconds. Anybody here work in human resources? Okay. Do you think about the org chart and how it might change if people have to respond within one tack time when an andon gets pulled? You will. I can almost guarantee it. That's the direction you're going in. So you're going to have to think about span of control, proximity, right, availability. When somebody pulls the cord, if nobody shows up, what's the likelihood that somebody else is going to pull the cord? Hey, I pulled the cord. Well, what'd you do? Well, nobody showed up, so I got the Phillips head screwdriver and I lined it up and I shoved the bolt in there. When they ask me, I'll tell them what happened. No. That's not the point, all right? It's different. It's different than that. Okay. So we don't make cars, right? We're not talking about cars. We're not talking about 60-second tack times. We're not talking about physical things that I can touch and feel and smell and get out of the way when it comes down the assembly line. We're talking about information that takes days, weeks, months. I'm not giving you years anymore. You're out of that game. You're into days, weeks, months at the most, and pretty soon we'll just be talking about days and weeks, right? So by the way, here's our lean analysts in the federal government saying, we have decided lean will never work in government. Well, no, it actually does work in government, right? You don't make cars, but I want you to look beyond the tools, look beyond the cord. You're not going to put a cord over everybody's desk. There isn't going to be a loud buzzer going off that everybody within 100 yards can hear and get shocked and, so what the heck happened? Right? There isn't going to be somebody running up there in 60 seconds because your environment isn't compatible with that and it doesn't even require that. But you are going to have a way of announcing an and-on condition. We just have to make it appropriate for your world. Right? Not that hard. So let's back up here and talk about the context within which it's supposed to work, a lean management system. So this is it. Anybody ever see this cartoon before? No? Okay. Everything you're doing in your lean implementation should be pointing in this direction. This is the core principle of lean. It's not about what you see on the shop floor when you go visit Toyota. It's not about what you see when you go visit even Arizona DEQ. But it's, are you doing the right things to move to an environment where everybody, every day, at every level in the organization, comes together in a small team and talks about, how did we do yesterday? Where was the waste? How can we do it better today? And then how can we make that our new standard work tomorrow? Everybody, every day, everywhere does this all the time. If you're getting closer to that, what you're doing is lean. If you're not getting closer to that, then it's not. It's really just that basic. In physics, they have this principle, first principles, right? The basic principles of physics. This is basically a first principle of lean. Everything comes down to this. We are creating a work environment in an atmosphere, including the culture, where this is encouraged, and not doing this is discouraged. So anytime you're thinking about, is this helping us get lean? Bring this picture up in your mind. Does this bring us closer to this? Have we redesigned the work? Have we redesigned the incentives? Have we redesigned the conversation to have this conversation or not? Everybody, every day, everywhere, at every level. Now, the problems they're working on are different at different levels, but it's no different. Right? The process isn't any different. So this is the lean management system. I stole this icon from you.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. I didn't think you'd mind. But there's 6 elements to it. Now, I am a major fan of a guy named David Mann. If you haven't read his work, you should read his work. It's foundational, and it's where my research picked up, is where his left off. So David and I worked for 2 different companies, but experienced the same thing in 2 different settings. He was working at Steelcase. I was working at United Technologies. with the same Japanese consultants by name, doing the same things in two different businesses. And we both arrived at the same conclusion that this is great stuff. You know, they're coming in and doing these really rapid improvement Kaizen events, but it's not sustaining. You know, we come back a week or two later, the action items aren't caught up on. Come back a month or two later, and it's actually going back the way it came. So David wrote about a few basic elements required to sustain the gain of a Kaizen. And that was very valuable to me. It was inspirational to me. But then we started thinking a little bit deeper about it and said, wait a minute, just sustaining the improvement coming out of a week-long Kaizen event, that's not lean, right? That's just preventing backsliding at that point. It's not everybody, every day, everywhere, how do we do, where's the waste, how do we do it better? So how do we truly create that continuous improvement culture? So we added a few more elements around that. It starts with true north. What's the purpose of the organization? And as a government agency, typically this is pretty straightforward for you, but why is it important? How many people did you say work in the agency total?
14,000.
14,000 people. That's a lot. It's a lot of people. So 14,000 people every day coming together in small teams thinking about how did we do yesterday, where's the waste, how do we do it better? There's a strong propensity for those people to go in different directions, right? Because a problem could have multiple solutions. True north is the glue that holds you together. If you truly understand your purpose as an organization and are not afraid to articulate it and keep people focused on it, you will find that those 14,000 people will quite consistently come up with decisions on how to fix a problem, how to solve a problem that are in a pretty consistent direction. I mean, there'd be some divergence, but they pretty much would be the same direction. And by the way, a lot's been written, some of it by me, on Toyota actually changed their true north at one point in their life. And it led to them having to pay a $1.4 billion criminal penalty because of people dying as a result of crashes that came out of a sudden acceleration syndrome problem. Which, by the way, every other company that makes cars has had the same problem. Toyota is the only one that paid a criminal penalty for it. And it had to do with what they did after it was discovered. And you can trace it right back to them changing their true north. Instead of being highest quality, lowest cost, safest manner, respect for people and society, it was to become the world's predominant supplier of transportation products and services. Can you see how that would change the solutions you come up with to a problem? It was that stark. It was that abrupt. Today, they're back to highest quality, lowest cost, safest manner, respect for people and society, which is where they need to be. Okay. The second one is standard work. The current one best way that we've decided on how to do something that we're going to continuously attack and improve. That's not easy, right? If you don't have an infrastructure in place, you're not going to be able to continuously improve it with any sort of control. The third is visual management. By the way, I've heard a lot about visual process performance. I haven't heard a lot about, in this setting, maybe it's there, I just haven't heard it, visual process adherence. Well, we always talk about visual management in two buckets: visual process adherence, visual process performance. And we always start with the adherence first. Is there a quality standard? Are we achieving the quality standard? Is there a process? Are we adhering to the process? If the answer is yes, I then come over here and I look at how am I performing in people, quality, delivery, cost, and continuous improvement. If you start here and you just look at metrics and you don't look at process, you become a management by objectives organization, which is a very different thing. People systems. You can talk about team-based collaborative problem solving. You can put the banners up. You can wave the flags. But do you think that the way you hire people, the way you write job specifications, the way you onboard them once you've hired them, the way you train them, the way they're organized, the people you decide to promote versus the people you decide not to promote, do you think that that has an influence on that, everybody, every day? Yeah, it does. Wait a minute, I'm over here participating with my team, sharing every thought and idea I have. Meanwhile, so-and-so back there never talks to us, got an idea from one of us, tried it out, and that guy just got promoted over there. HR, why do you do that? You got to stop doing that, right? The point is there's a people value stream, right? Along with the life cycle of the products that you produce for your customers, there's a people value stream. People come into the organization, they experience things, and then ultimately they exit from the organization. You have to align all those policies, systems, and practices with the culture that you ultimately seek to serve. Now, you don't change culture from the outside in. Henry talked about this earlier, and you're absolutely right. You have to start with the work and keep putting these shells around it that lead to a culture, and then you'll look and see that you have the culture. And one of those shells is people systems. You can't fight that headwind forever. You'll always find early adopters, the people that buy the iPhone standing in the rain. You'll always find those people. But even they will get discouraged if they see that they're constantly being passed over from somebody else that isn't exhibiting the behaviors and the attributes that you're promoting. Right? That will speak more loudly than anybody's voice at some point. Leader standard work and lean leadership behaviors. We're going to talk some more length about this. I won't go into it now. But accountability. Unfortunately, in this day and age, accountability has become a polite, genteel term for blame. It's not blame. That's not what we're looking for here. Suppose I said, look, every Wednesday morning, I want to get you all in this room, and we're going to have a blame meeting. We're going to go through all the regions, find out everything that was wrong, and I'm going to put something up here. I'm going to have all the things that went wrong this week, and I'm going to pick names that I think most closely were associated with what went wrong, and we're going to come into this room, and we're just going to give those people the silent treatment for an hour. How many of you would come to that meeting? But we kind of do that, right? We kind of, accountability. If I say, look, we're going to have an accountability on Wednesday morning, accountability meeting on Wednesday morning, because we absolutely have to get to the bottom of these problems. Well, that sounds a little more professional, doesn't it? But it's really blame. The way it's manifested itself, right? The way it's turned into, the way we manage it is a blame meeting. So if you sense that you're going to get blamed for a problem by exposing it, how likely are you going to be to pull the and-on cord? How likely are you going to be to highlight that problem in your team in the morning at the meeting? Not very likely. Right? So what we want is a definition of accountability that captures a sense of building excitement over having found a problem that we can work on and make it better. Just like we did yesterday with that other problem, and the day before that with that other problem. And we are getting so much better than we ever were because we're identifying these problems and improving the process and building upon that improvement for the next improvement. And it's not just my hands that you've hired me for anymore, although you don't do manual work, but you're hiring me for my heart and my head as well. That's a much more fulfilling job than just doing the assigned task. Or at least it should be for the right type of people. All right, so accountability is critical to this. So these 6 elements together are designed to not just sustain an improvement once you put it in place, but develop a culture of continuous improvement. But it ain't easy. So, boy, sorry about this. When it went from one computer to another, I guess the words just got all over the place. But so here's Alfred Sloan and Peter Drucker talking about General Motors, world's most complex company. And they've developed this brand new management system called Management by Objectives. And Peter is calling Al up and saying, hey, Al, I got this great plan. We're going to develop Management by Objectives. And Pete says, yeah, that's great. Come on over the weekend and we'll put it in Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we'll be doing it. Well, no, it didn't work that way. But sometimes when we get involved in lean, we kind of feel like, boy, 6 months, a year, we should get this, right? So you are much further ahead than I expected you to be at this point. I'm going to say something here that I hope I don't get kicked out over, but this is at its very, very best a 5 or 6 year journey. And you are ahead of the curve. So keep at it. Don't get discouraged because it's not 5 or 6 years before you get any improvement. you'll be continuing to improve at a much more rapid rate each and every month for the next 5 or 6 years. That's what I expect from you. And that's pretty energizing. So, it's like, I want to say it's like running, but I hate to run. So, it's like running a marathon. Every mile I feel like I can go 2 miles more. I don't even understand what the hell that means. But trust me, when you're doing these things and you see ideas getting generated at twice the rate they were last month, 4 times the rate they were a month ago, and continuing on in a geometric progression, and then ultimately, getting to a point where you're running at 60, 70 implemented ideas per employee per year, 14,000 employees, that's totally attainable for you. You're just not going to get it in 6 months, though. But in 6 months, you'll be much better than you are right now, as good as you are. So leader standard work, 4 elements: Gemba walks, reflection meetings, one-on-one, and and-on response. And I know you call reflection meetings huddles. Continue to do so. It's not a dig on that. This is a generic descriptive term. Because when I hear huddle, I think about a football huddle. And there's not a lot of, so what do you think we're going to do on this one? I don't know, what'd you see on that last play? Brady's having this big, long conversation, everybody reflecting on the last 6 games and that player and listening to everybody. No, it's like we're doing this, this, and this, and they go, right? This truly is a reflection meeting, right? This is what this should be. It shouldn't be the boss standing up saying this, this, and this, and then we go. But don't change your lexicon because you know what it means. I'm just telling you why we use that term. So Gemba walks, going to see the Gemba. I use very few Japanese words. I like to use Gemba because I do not know of an English equivalent to that word. It doesn't just mean where the work takes place. It has an underlying meaning of where the truth lies. All right, go to Gemba. And I can't tell you, you've probably seen the same thing, how many times I've sat in a conference table with a bunch of engineers talking about some engine problem, and I was working at Pratt & Whitney, talking about fan blades blowing up and whatnot, and we're sitting there, we're talking for hours, and everybody thinks they know what they just talked about. And then afterwards, I'd go outside and I'd go down to the test cell or the factory where the blades are being made or tested, and I'd see, I'm like, wow, is that what we were talking about? Oh my God. Like it's a whole different thing, right? So going to Gemba is very, very fundamental to a lean leader. You're going to live at Gemba much more than you ever did before, if you don't already. Reflection meetings. This is where that conversation happens. How did we do yesterday? Where's the waste? How do we do it better? That thing we improved yesterday, is that today's standard work? Yeah. Okay, let's move forward. One-on-one. This is our quiet time, right? It's not a performance review necessarily, or there might be some element of that. It's mostly, hey, as your leader, it's my responsibility to develop you and evolve your thinking. This is the stage upon which I do that, one-on-one. I mean, we do it in public too, but this is where we get to talk quietly. I get to give you feedback on, here's how I think it's going. What do you think? What can I do better? What can you do better? And it doesn't happen once a year, right? We're talking like once a week, once a month at the most. And finally, the and-on response, which is what this talk is supposed to be about. So standard work. Current one, best way we've agreed on, but that will change 10 times in the next 10 months. Imagine that in your world. Changing your standard work once a month. Oof, the room just went, I felt the silence coming over me. I could just feel it, like, Joe, what are you saying here? So obviously, you don't do this by wishing, and you don't do it instantly. Things have to align. But it's not just coming up with a new idea. It's not just, hey, I have an idea, let's go try it. That's where it starts. But once you've tried it, and you've demonstrated that it's better in some way, you now need an infrastructure in place to quickly turn that into the new standard work. So what has to happen? First of all, I need a safe place to experiment. Right? In a factory setting, we call it the moonshine shop. You go back there, you cobble some tooling together to go try it. In your world, you're going to have your own form of moonshine if you don't already have it. And I know sometimes you want to drink, but that's another story. Once you've tried the experiment, you need some way to gain approval for it, right? You need some way to say, yes, this will become the new standard work. We agree. Once that happens, it actually has to be printed up, turned into standard work. Everybody has to be trained in it, and leaders need to understand how it impacts their leader standard work. So one of the companies that I really respect is Autoliv Corporation. They're an airbag manufacturer. In front of each of the work cells, there's visuals there, but one of the visuals is new standard work this week. And if I'm a foreman on the line, I will, as I'm walking in, look for the new standard work this week. And it's my job when I walk in and observe the work to ask them, so what new processes do you have this week? And confirm that they're aware of the new process and actually carrying it out to the new way of doing things. That infrastructure has to be thought about in this setting, right, in this world. How do you just take a new idea and turn it into fully distributed standard work and do it quickly? Because obviously if you're doing it once a month, you can't take a month to do it. It's doable. You're smart people. We'll figure it out. Just be aware of what the target condition looks like. And ultimately, this is what Lean is about, right? So we run an experiment, we improve the standard work, we put that wedge underneath it, that's our new standard work, and then we immediately look at it again and again and again, right? It's continual improvement. So this is standard work in a knowledge flow setting. This is an insurance company example, a little different than your work. This is also an insurance application, but these are more higher end policies where it's not quite as linear. Decisions have to be made along the way. Some codified judgment has to be put in place. So the standard work looks different, right? The tools manifest themselves in a way that makes sense to that environment. And this is DEQ standard work in Arizona, right? So it's not just for cars, right? We have lots of experience in banking, insurance, government agencies, healthcare organizations, totally non-manufacturing related organizations that are doing this and doing it well. And you have examples of your own. I'm not sure you have the infrastructure in there to change it and improve it once a month yet, though, right? But you will. And then finally, of all the metrics you're looking at, when somebody asks you, so how are you doing with your management system implementation, this should be the metric you're focused on. This is the holy grail. Implemented ideas per employee per year. And some people misinterpret this and say, you mean I have to hold, Tom Jones here to 60 ideas per year? No, not by name, on aggregate across the organization. All right, we're not looking to single people out and scapegoat them. But you want this number to go up significantly over the next year and continue to do so for the next 5 years. All right. That's a lot of work. But that's what lean thinking organizations do. That's where lean thinking people get their energy from. It's what makes it exciting to work there. The one thing, every time I've had Toyota people come in and speak with us, or we've gone to visit Toyota, several people in the Murley group come from Toyota, the one thing I've consistently heard was, this is the hardest job I've ever had, but it's the best job I ever had. So being challenged is not a negative thing if it's done in a positive way. So that's what we're trying to capture here. So what problem are we trying to solve? What we're trying to do is we're trying to connect top-level leaders with frontline workers and everybody in between so that people see what's going on in the process. Henry talked about this earlier, that everything emanates from the process, right, the core process. So getting people down to see it, touch it, feel it, smell it when something's going wrong is critical to this and-on process, right? Is a methodology to not start to put solutions in place that don't truly understand the problem and everything it entails. So part of that is an escalation process. We'll use the Toyota example because it's instructive. If a car goes beyond 60 seconds and it's not right, the end-on cord gets pulled. And within another 60 seconds, they're organized and structured so that somebody shows up within another 60 seconds. As time goes on, higher and higher level people are called until about the 4-hour mark, I believe it is now, the plant manager shows up and trying to figure out what's going on here, right? So that escalation process is important to build a sense of urgency around these problems. Now, do you have to use 60 seconds, 5 minutes, 4 hours? No. You develop your own, but you have to understand the principle of escalation and its purpose. It's to bring more resource to it, more attention to it, more criticality to it. And again, it's not about blaming people, it's about fixing processes. So this is the DEQ escalation matrix. I beat them up regularly over the fact there's no timing on this. It's just first this person, then that person, then that person. We kind of leave it up to judgment on when we escalate. Sorry guys, it's not working for me, but it's an example. So what is an and-on? So this is an and-on. It's a brush company. They sell brushes. It's not an and-on. It's not the one we're talking about, right? Okay, let's see. It's an and-on thing you wouldn't understand. For those people that are parents, you probably understand this a little better. And-on, the legend. Yeah. How about this? Is this an and-on? Is that an and-on? Yes. They're definitely going to fix an emergency, but there's not a whole lot of development going on there, right? So this is an and-on. This is the statement you're making with your and-on. In whatever form it takes in your world, it has to say this to your organization. Right here, right now, under these current circumstances I'm working under, our process is not giving us the result that we need. Your and-on has to say that. Obviously not in words, but it has to communicate that. Right here, right now, under these conditions, the process isn't giving us the result that we seek. Now, I don't really brag a lot about this, but I'm a Six Sigma black belt too, right? So I started my process improvement career using Six Sigma methodologies. And those projects would last 6 months to a year in some cases, trying to fix a problem. Most of it, in reflection, most of that time was spent doing the forensics under which circumstances this problem occurs. Going back and marshaling parts and trying to figure out when they were cast, when they were machined, who machined it, was it first shift, second shift, third shift, was it a cold weather night, was it a warm weather night, trying to find all the conditions under which the problem occurred. And then one day I realized, so, in a mature and-on environment, if I can get out there and see the ambient conditions under which the problem occurred, a lot of that other stuff becomes obsolete. I can solve the problem much more quickly, much more decisively than doing the Six Sigma analysis. Now, I'm not saying that those in-depth statistics are useless. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying if you are structured in a way where a problem has to fester for months before the right level person can start to work on it, you've missed the point. You've missed a lot of opportunity to just solve it very quickly using an and-on methodology. And then ultimately, what we want to do is bring that and-on to the huddle meeting. Right? Because what happened here? We made an open and notorious claim that there's a problem with the process here. Tomorrow, we're going to have this meeting. And people will know that that and-on's been pulled. So I'm not starting from scratch here, right? People know that the and-on is pulled. They may not know all the circumstances, but there's been some introduction about the fact it was pulled. And again, we're going to come up with accommodations for the fact you're working in an office environment or a field environment. But now when I come together at the team meeting, I can talk about this and discuss more deeply what we observed. Others might be able to contribute if they've experienced similar things. And we get to a point where we can effectively solve the problem much more quickly. And in our problem-solving methodology, we always try to structure it along these two axes. And I made in Arizona, I actually made what some of my people call a massive mistake because I talked about 3 boxes, right? Where when I'm standing in this box, all I can do is describe the problem and everything I know about it, right? And I can't solve it till I get to the 3rd box. And ultimately, we progressed, and now we've got these 2 axes here, but it's still the same basic principle. First of all, do we know what should be happening? Is there a clear quality standard that's been accepted? Do we know what actually happened? Can I compare the output of this to that standard? Is there a gap? If there's a gap, by definition, that is a problem. There's no argument over that. There's a standard. There's a result. If the result is different than the standard, it is a problem by definition. Now we get to what do we know and what don't we know about that gap, which then leads to a discussion around how can we learn the things we don't know about that gap in order to solve this problem. All right. So there's lots of structure around this, depending on the complexity of the problem, but it always comes down to this. We've nicknamed this wasabi-wa, right? What should be happening, what's actually happening, what do we know, what don't we know? But nonetheless, as you get more deeply involved in learning problem-solving methodologies, you'll find that all roads lead back to this. And then it's also about developing people. All right, so we'll use this thing called the GROW model in these conversations as well. We're teaching people how to see and think about problem solving more effectively, and thus making them more valuable employees. The goal, the reality, the options, and the way forward, as we like to say, or the will to continue forward and actually resolve the problem. So it's an employee development tool as well as a problem-solving tool. So ultimately, the and-on process is a coaching process. Right? It's not the fire engines coming to save the day necessarily, although there is some element of that, but primarily it's a coaching process to help us see problems, clearly identify problems, and engage very overtly, very aggressively on solving those problems. So we've made some adaptations, right? This isn't going to work. Right? Putting the cord over the desk and a loud buzzer going off, yeah, you'd get shot. You know, that just isn't going to work. So we're not doing that. So you got some environmental adjustments to make here. First of all, you're less time sensitive. You're not working on a 60-second tack time. You're working in an office environment, right? There's a certain decorum. You might disagree, but there's a certain decorum in an office environment, whether you like it or not. It's a dispersed environment, right? Sometimes your immediate supervisor may not even work in the same building that you're working in. And the process is not always linear. You have lots of diamonds and circles and decision makings. So things change. But there are 2 primary and-on notification tools that we have seen repeat themselves in office settings. One is a desk flag and the other is office hours, and variations on these. Some of them are electronic as well, but they kind of come down to this. So one is, I'm sitting at my desk and there's actually a physical flag that goes up. Sometimes we take like an orange flag and just stand it up. And it's understood that when my supervisor comes through, they're going to see a flag at my desk, which will place priority on them coming to see me because I have an and-on. All right, so in settings where you don't need to see somebody more than a couple of times a day, that works. It's unobtrusive, it's easy, it fits in well with the culture of an office. The other methodology is office hours, where there's just an agreement between the team and the supervisor. It says, look, every day at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m., I'm going to be sitting in my office. If anybody has an and-on condition, just come on in, walk in, and talk to me. And we'll take it from there. Now, I might be doing other work at the time, but primarily I'm in that office to respond to andons, right? Sometimes we do this electronically. The flag might be an electronic flag. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to get too far away from the whole team knowing about the fact that there's an andon. So even in the office hour setting, there's usually some visual right outside the office that says, I have a problem with a descriptor. All right, so when we get to the huddle meeting, people are aware that there's an andon and that we're doing something about it. So enablers, you have to have quality standards. Right? If there's no standard, you can't define a problem. It has to be standard work. There has to be an agreed to one best way to do the job that we're going to improve upon. If not, then your first order of business is to create standard work. People have to be trained, right? They have to be adequately trained and observed to have been proficient before they're turned loose to work on their own. And there has to be a leadership followership commitment, right? It's a symbiotic relationship. My job as your leader is to help build your problem-solving muscle. So you identifying a problem is not a negative thing. You're actually helping me do my job. Okay, I am going to move forward. Right, so bias to process. This is important. I'll give you a little example. This is actually a real example. Sort of a parody of a real example. I guess in the political environment we work in today, parodies are well understood. What? Is that a dig? Bias the process. So Nikki was found to have entered the wrong information 10 times on an application. That's factual. And in a one-on-one, Nikki says, I'm so sorry. I know how important it is to get this right. I'll be much more attentive in the future. Right, so they're apologetic and they feel badly for it. Okay. What did we find? The entry form had two similar fields right next to one another, making it easy to paste the information in the wrong spot. Right, because sometimes we'll start to mistake-proof forms and purposely move things out. And we'll use computer monitors that have optical, they have a sensor on it that senses where your eye is going. And we can tell where people are spending most of their eye contact time on the screen and use that for mistake proofing. We'll do things like that, crazy stuff like that. But they found these two fields right next to one another, right in the center of the field, make it really easy to paste in the wrong cell. The process has no error tracking mechanism that would have highlighted the problematic field. So other than finding this almost by accident, and then as Nikki called attention to herself by having screwed it up more than once, her boss paid even more attention to her, and therefore she was found to have done it wrong even more. They don't know. She might have been actually the best at this, right? She could have been amongst the best, but there was no error tracking mechanism. There's no work rotation minimizing the risk of erroneous entries, right? Because they find as people work, they get tired, and things like that will have a higher likelihood to occur. So what they do, they ran experiments, they modified standard work, and fix the process. Right. Okay, I'm over time. This thing is beeping at me here. Time for me to start sipping scotch. But I will take a couple of questions if that's okay. Questions, comments, hopes, aspirations, concerns, miscellaneous ramblings, anything at all that you'd like to talk? Yes?
One of the things that struck me when you were talking was the example of Toyota and the True North example.
Yeah.
I'm finding with many teams.
Could you repeat that, just so everybody hears your question?
One of the things that struck me in your presentation was the example of Toyota and their loss of the True North. I am a champion. I feel like I'm the iPhone user you're referring to.
Yeah.
But
you have the one with the 3 cameras?
I haven't got there yet.
Come on, man.
I'm running into teams that I feel like are facing this True North issue with EPA right now. I've been with the agency 27 years. I've seen administrations come and go. And I think what I would love to hear from you is how Toyota fought through the loss of the True North and got back to where they wanted to be. Because I feel like our mission, we are incredibly mission driven. And when you don't see that mission being preached by,
Yeah.
the people who are going to come and go, it becomes difficult for these teams to use transparency tools and visual management when they don't have that fundamental trust in higher management.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I understand where you're coming from with this. I will just put a plug in for Henry here. I've known him for a while now. He believes in that mission. He absolutely believes in it.
I'm not putting blame at Henry or anyone else.
No, I didn't think you were. I just wanted to tell you that's been my observation. But I do understand that administrations come and go, and these things come and go along with it. But the true north should never change. What happened at Toyota, first of all, they hid the problem to begin with, right? Their immediate reaction was to take a very commercial approach and tell people, well, it's the floor mats. Okay, so somebody had the presence of mind in one of these cars that was accelerating to put the car in and out of neutral and drive it into a Toyota dealership and put it up against the wall, against the wall of the dealership with the engine revving up. And the floor mats were in the trunk as instructed. So it wasn't floor mats. Well, then Toyota said, well, people die all the time, it's bad driving. Okay, bad driving. An off-duty state trooper with his family in the back, his brother in the passenger seat, starts accelerating down the highway. His brother uses the trooper's cell phone to dial 911, explains what's going on just before they hit an embankment and killed everybody in the car. So this is somebody who drives at high speeds on interstate highways for a living. Probably not bad driving. So the things they were doing to hide the problem were absolutely being debunked. What happened was the original family members that were running Toyota that had recently retired came back in. And they basically took the reins back over. And they said, we're getting back to what we were. And I don't know if anybody here remembers the commercials that they were playing at the time or what happened during the time. I mean, I'm in this business, so I was obviously sensitized to it. One is they shut down all the dealerships. They shut down the factories. And I believe they had them shut down for 3 weeks. Then there were commercials coming on talking about getting back to our roots. All right, top to bottom, top to bottom. And essentially that's what they did. They came back and they reestablished their true north. And what's really important is the person doing the huddle meeting. For those of you that are going to be running huddle meetings, this places such a tremendous responsibility on you to bring that true north into the huddle meeting each and every day. When somebody starts to diverge, you need to be able to go back and say, look, it's not that I don't like your idea or I do like your idea, but can we all talk about how well aligned this is with our true north? And it should be up there in big bold letters, above the huddle board. So those are the primary steps that Toyota took to resolve the issue, and why I feel so strongly about it. And, there's a chapter in the book on it. Yeah. Got a microphone here?
Likely it's only me that doesn't quite understand the connection, but would you speak just a second to how our use of tick sheets relates to this concept that you've just explained about andon?
The tick sheets. So,
Do you know what he's talking about, Joe?
I don't.
So whenever a proxy gets behind schedule,
Okay.
we ask that there be a reason that's written on the chart.
Okay, so whenever a proxy card on a flow board falls behind, you put that on a tick sheet. The reason for it gets put on a tick sheet. Okay. I wouldn't necessarily call that an andon condition. I don't know. Unless you're likening it to, well, the car's been here for more than 60 seconds, so by definition it becomes an andon. But you decide what the andon conditions are. Now, the problem you're going to face in the early days is that everything is going to be a problem, and you only have limited resources. So you want to arm people with the ability to solve their own problems early on. Right? People that can do some root cause analysis, have some authority to run some experiments, try it for a few days, and then a way to escalate this proposed solution to determine whether or not it becomes the new standard work. So you've got to do these things in concert with one another. Otherwise, and I've seen this happen, and the insurance industry was famous for this. Somebody has a problem, they put it on a form, and then it doesn't fit on a sheet, and they're getting the smaller and smaller font, and then they start putting multiple sheets on it, then they use them front and back on the sheet, and pretty soon there's just so many problems, you know that they're never going to address any of them at that point. So don't turn it loose across the whole agency at once. Do it in an area, arm them with the ability to actually solve those problems, and let them self-govern, how many of those problems they're going to take on for a period of time. There's just no other practical way to start down that path. Maybe one more question and call it Miller time.
Joe, you mentioned that each andon is an opportunity to improve the process.
Yep.
And that it's about developing the people.
Yeah.
So can developing the people be the process?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, let's assume for the moment that you're putting a definition out there of a process that says something like a qualified person, whatever those qualifications are for that particular job, but somebody meets those qualifications, given the requisite amount of training, should be able to consistently carry that process out and get the result that we're looking for. Now, if you do all those things, right, you found the right person, you trained them, and they're sitting down with their standard work, and we're still getting all these defects, you want to go look at where your assumptions went bad. Did we not put the right person on the job? Did we not train them adequately and effectively? We think we've trained them, but we really haven't trained them in a way that's effective. Or is the process just more than can be handled in a reasonable fashion? And therefore we got... Well, now, so again, you choose the people that you decide what people you have working for you, right? That's where I started this conversation, actually. Now, again, I don't want anybody walking out of here and say, Joe, fire a bunch of people. I did not say that. Okay, not saying that. But if you have somebody who's just not motivated to do the job, that's not a process problem. That's not the operating process problem. That's an HR systems, policies, practices problem. And by the way, HR doesn't mean that it belongs to the HR department. It could be the supervisor is not dealing with their human resources appropriately, right? They're just not dealing effectively with somebody that's not being a good actor. But if somebody's, got the basic capability and is putting in the requisite effort, honestly putting in the requisite effort, and they're still not able to effectively carry out the process, you have to look at either the training or the process itself and make it better. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Joe, for being here.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it, taking the time. As you probably noticed,